If you can relate to what folks are talking about, great. I think that is exactly what we need in this day and age to tear down all the barriers and the walls that exist.
Right.
If the bridge can be hip hop, cross it.
What we done started. Look at what we done started. This the people party.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, party people. This is Talib Kweli. This is the People's Party. We have Jasmin Lee in the house. She gonna hold me down. We have a lot of beautiful, wonderful, inspirational things to talk about, and we're gonna talk about them tonight with one of my favorite people on the planet, award-winning commentator, activist, journalist, lawyer. I mean, this woman does it all. She is the voice for the community. We love her around here. Give it up for Miss Angela Rye. Angela.
Hello.
How are you?
Good to see you. Hi, Jasmin.
Hi, Angela.
Thank you for coming, Angela.
Thank you for having me.
We are honored by your presence.
Thank you. That was so nice. I'm happy to be here.
I'm happy that you're here too. Thank you for joining us on the People's Party.
The People's Party. That's a thing. That should be like a real thing.
It should.
There's like merch and a movement that's starting.
You're a part of the beginning of it.
Hey.
You know, we want to be sophisticated.
Yes.
Yes.
That is the thing too.
Yes.
That is the thing too.
Yes, I read that about you. I read that you were sophisticated.
Yes, I should have trademarked that. That is the thing.
So you and me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but our relationship developed on Twitter first.
I think that sounds right. Yeah. That's probably right.
I was once suspended on Twitter.
Yes, I remember this.
Yeah, I've been locked on Twitter and I've been suspended on Twitter, and people don't really understand the difference a lot of times.
You know, they don't know sometimes if you the troll or the trollee.
That's right.
That's what
right.
happens.
But I was,
the hell out of these people.
you know, I troll the trolls sometimes.
Yes.
And I was a white supremacist troll that actually posted my mom's address. And yeah. Exactly right.
Crazy.
But yeah, a white supremacist trolled me and posted my mother's address. And I wrote something like, "You can be found."
Yeah.
And I was suspended.
you can.
Yeah, you can. And I was
Especially
looking
if
for
you
him.
post my mama's address.
Yeah, I was looking for him.
Like I might be finding you right now.
Yeah, like I don't want to go too deep into it, but he could have been found. You know what I'm saying? And I got suspended for that.
Yeah.
And the first person I called was Angela Rye.
I remember.
Yeah.
I remember. So my uncle, Steve Looney, had just passed away, and we were at his memorial service, like on the way there. And I was talking to my mom. I was like, "Mom, that's suspended Talib's account." She was like, "Who?" I was like, "Never mind." So I'm like on the way to the memorial service, like I got to get his account reinstated. So I had just done an event with Twitter, and they were fantastic. And I think it changed quickly, right?
Yeah, I was suspended for about an hour.
Look at God.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, an hour later, I had my account. I had an apology.
Yeah.
And it took them about 3 days to give me all my followers back. I think I had about 800,000
Forgot
followers.
about that part too.
Yeah. But it was interesting. You know, a couple years later, I was locked because I had a white supremacist lawyer, Jason Van Dyke, who was threatening me and my fans with, "I'm gonna shoot you and I'm gonna hang you," and all types of things. And I posted his business address, and they locked my account. But I remain on Twitter because, you know, I enjoy it.
Yeah.
I do.
You really enjoy it.
I do. I enjoy it a lot.
Yes, we know. We know. Sometimes I'm like, I feel like I should tell him to take a spa day. Like, I need a spa day. We need to like do some breathing exercises. And
You know, it's crazy. I'm privileged, very privileged in my life. I take a lot of spa days.
I know, but I'm saying right when I'm watching you tweet, I'm like, right now.
I'm probably at the spa when I'm tweeting. You know what I'm saying? Like,
On that note, we are definitely taking your phone because you are missing out on some things. I'm taking, I will be honest with you, since the 2016 election, which was traumatizing to me and in a lot of ways was a game changer, some good, some bad. I really have not been on Twitter as much.
I noticed.
It has taken me a moment to just really get in alignment with myself, figure out how I want to present to the world and what I feel is like the healthiest way for me to engage. And I don't think Twitter is it. There's some things I think from folks in our own community that I've seen that have been harmful to people I care about and to me directly.
I agree.
There are things where, like, I remember being on air saying that, like, the Make America Great Again hat is triggering for many of us. And the response to that from the other side was not to figure out why. Like, well, what's going on? Why?
Right,
we don't
right,
want
right,
anything
right.
we're championing to be triggering to folks. Their response was to send me Make America Great Again hats over and over and over again. That's not a death threat, although I have had some of those too. But I just feel like, for what? Like, this is not real life. You know
Right.
what I mean? And if this isn't constructive discourse, this isn't the type of conversation I want to have.
No, yeah, I understand. I tell people about my Twitter feed. It's like, I really enjoy it. I feel empowered by it. But I understand that that's a unique thing for me.
Yeah.
I understand my life experience has led me in a unique place to have a unique platform with a unique plethora of information
Yeah.
that allows me to push back in ways that others can't.
Yeah.
That might be triggering for other folks. It might be stressful.
Yeah.
It's like, for me, it's not.
Wait, I have to tell you one more thing. So you were talking about where we first met, or at least had a conversation. I want to say this, and I'm not going to speak on behalf of the culture, but I know that there are tons of people who are of the culture who feel this way. Like, your music has been game changing and healing and transformative to so many of us. I used to have Beautiful Struggle on repeat. Like, I might just bring that back today just because. Like, that whole album was
Thank you.
incredible to me. And, of course, everything before that. But, like, that
man.
one in particular was like, I love this.
You're going to make a black man blush.
Good. Come
I
on,
see it. I
blush,
see it coming.
Receive your flowers.
Well, you know what's crazy? And Jared can appreciate this from Raucous, because he's in the house as well. You know, Beautiful Struggle, that's the album where I started having black female fans. Like, before then, it was mostly male.
Yeah.
A lot of white fans, because it was very much, you know, sold and marketed and presented based on who I was as underground.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And in that culture was very testosterone driven. And Beautiful Struggle, I had achieved a little bit of success, and now I could afford Mary J. Blige and Faith Evans, and it had Neptune's beats on there. And it's like, there was things I did as a black person that I think went against sort of what the hip hop culture I was a part of at the time was. It was like, people were like, why is there all this singing on the, why is it all this? And I'm like, well, this is where I come from. Like, I might exist and do this underground hip hop, backpack, nod your head real well, but I come from lush sounds and R&B and vocalists. And I was the first artist to have Mary and Faith on an album together since Biggie. That was like important to me.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But you are very much involved in hip hop culture, and you just telling me that story lets me know. Like, when I read things from you, I read this thing that you did for CNN where you made your point very well, but you quoted JCole lyrics while you were making your point. You're associated with hip hop so much. You're associated with Common. You're associated with the Breakfast Club. Why are you so associated with hip hop?
I think that there are things about, like, the way that I think about my house. So my parents had black art on the walls and black books on the shelves, and made sure that I had black dolls. But I have a brother who's 14 years older than me, Brian, who I call Bubba. And
Shout out to Bubba.
to Bubba. And Brian was always listening to hip hop. And so I think that was my entree into hip hop. But to me, I can tie every song growing up that influenced me in any way to an experience. And that's not unique to hip hop. That's R&B too. That's listening to Motown cassette tapes on road trips with my parents. Like, but of course, many of those beats sampled by hip hop artists. So there are just experiences that I have that are tied directly to music. Music is so important to me. Not just because I can quote a lyric on CNN, but because when I heard that lyric, it spoke to my soul. You know what I mean? In a real unique way. So I think that I'm not talented in that way.
You're very talented.
I
understand. Yeah, right.
In that way. Like, I could be in the soprano section in the third row, right? Like, it needs to be far back. Like, you know, don't have the mic right over my mouth.
Right.
But I think that the reality of it is I love beats and I love the inspiration that our music and art, period. I think about, like, Alvin Ailey and, you know, the shows that we've had on Broadway or that never made it to Broadway, our television shows growing up. Like, I love what art has done for us and our expression of that. And it's so dope that folks try to culturally appropriate it, but you just can't do us better than us.
That's
And
right.
so
In 2019, it's crazy because like hip hop has changed so much, and like it's not just a black thing now. Like all different cultures are doing hip hop. And when it first came out, it was pretty much so we could tell our stories. But in 2019, do you think that hip hop is more than just like party music, or is it still like revolutionary?
So this may be something I get trolled for, but this is my truth. I believe there's a distinction between hip hop and pop rap. And I think that right now there's a dominance of pop rap. But I also think that it's not all the way fair to say it's always been black. There was a group called the Beastie Boys. I'm just saying. But it's overwhelmingly black then, and it's still overwhelmingly black now. And I think the reality of it is it allows people to express however they see fit. And it's always had a multicultural audience and supporters and fans, and like more power to the people. If you can relate to what folks are talking about, great. I think that is exactly what we need in this day and age to tear down all the barriers and the walls that exist. Right. If the bridge can be hip hop, cross it.
Right. Chuck D once famously called hip hop CNN for the black community.
Love it.
Now we have a lot more channels. That was back when CNN was like really like
the
news channel, right? Now we have a lot more. But I think to Chuck D's point, hip hop was feeding the community with information, with inspiration, feeding marginalized communities with all that. Does hip hop still do that?
I think it does. You talked about JCole a moment ago. Like, I know so many folks who learned about tax policy on the last JCole album. Even the stuff that Cardi does, who I think has crossed over between hip hop and pop.
Right.
She's still she's speaking to people using her personal experiences to educate folks.
Right.
And
even
uplift.
And uplift. And I think the other thing that hip hop is doing a little better now, like even if you look at the 444 album, getting people to talk about their experiences. And it's crazy because we started talking about 2016 and how that was transformative to me. I can't believe how impacted I personally have been from Nipsey's death and the community.
Right.
And one of the things, going back to like what we learned from hip hop, all the stuff that he was talking about us doing, the ways in which he was pouring back into the community that raised him, like we have so much to learn. And if we are responsive to and heed the lessons that are in hip hop, we would be doing so much better. Starting with Chuck D, like man, I mean, if we would really listen and not just be like, ooh, that's deep, and then move on, but ooh, that's deep, how am I gonna apply? We'll be so much better off.
Yeah, man. I agree. Chuck D's name comes up so often in these conversations.
Incredible.
It's interesting. Chuck D graduated from Adelphi University years later in his career while my father was teaching there.
Oh, man.
A little while ago, about a couple months ago, my father and Chuck D did a conference together, which was interesting for me to watch because it's like my hip hop father and my actual father sitting down and having a conversation.
That's dope.
My parents made sure that you were talking about black books. I didn't have black dolls, but I had all types of black things. And I've seen you do interviews talking about this Anheuser-Busch Kings and Queens poster, which I also had.
I was gonna ask you, you had it. Like we're old enough. It's the older ones.
Yeah, you have that. You got the footprints in the sand, the Jesus with the footprints, and you got the Anheuser-Busch.
I didn't have the Jesus with the footprints. I definitely had
Did you guys have the statues with all the naked African women?
I
my
did.
mom had those all over the house.
for sure. Statues with the spear. There's there's a picture, I should post it soon, but there's a picture of me and my brother. He was going to his prom and I'm looking up at him with the baddest leg warmers that ever existed. I used to try to wear the things every day. But there's a picture of Jesse Jackson hanging on the mantle. Next to that is this picture with Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali. And then what else is over there? There's like Essence in the basket. Anyway, it was a very black household.
So your father was an activist in Seattle.
He still is.
Still is. Eddie Rye.
Eddie Rye with a bullhorn.
Shout out to Eddie Rye. And he named you after Angela Davis.
Yes.
I'm named Talib Kweli.
Yeah.
How important is it to have that representation in your name, in your household, that black representation growing up?
Well, it's major, and the more I learned about Angela Davis, I was floored and humbled, and I'm like, how am I ever gonna live up to that? So some of it too is like pressure, but a full circle moment for me was just this past January meeting her for the first time and being like, and then for her to know who I was ready to die right there. I was like, this is so dope. So
you feel like you're in the right place, right?
I just felt like whole. You know what I mean? It was in that moment where it was like just complete, like, wow, this is somebody who not only knows who I am, but who says she's proud of what I'm doing. Like, it meant the world to me. And especially, like, she's brilliant.
Ain't she, though?
Oh, my God. Like, brilliant. The stuff she's doing, mass incarceration, the way in which she's advocating for our brothers and sisters in Palestine, like, all the stuff she's done. I heard a conversation with her, and she mentioned that somebody asked her, do you feel spread too thin, like having to mobilize and work on behalf of people all over the world? And she was like, no, if there are people struggling somewhere, like, it's our obligation to kind of help them get ahead. And I'm like, man, that is so real. But she's incredible.
Yeah, I think your representation, or how you grow up, like, really molds your mind. Because as you keep talking about black dolls, we weren't allowed to have anything besides black dolls. So when we were growing up, we knew black was beautiful. I went to all black school. We were taught lift every voice and sing. Like, we had those things to look up to.
Yeah, no, it makes a huge difference, and I think that what I've noticed now, what I've come to realizing is that is still a form of privilege. So I like to acknowledge that too. Like, one, thank you to my parents.
Educational privilege.
Man, like the education piece, the fact that my mom knew that, like, as soon as I left the house every day, that my blackness would be tried and tested, that I might be invisible in textbooks. So they were like, well, we're gonna show you some other books.
Right.
Like, it was just a major thing, and I'm so grateful for them.
Well, I think the reason why Angela Davis could come up to you and know who you are and be proud of you is because you really have, on many levels, become our voice. When we see you on TV, like, you say things with your face, with your eyes, and with your words that when I'm watching, it's very rare that I watch a talking head on a commentating on politics that I'm like, that's exactly how I feel. That's exactly what I would have said. You spoke when we first started talking about how emotional the 2016 election made you feel. And we all saw that.
Yeah.
We all saw you on TV going through that. Do you still feel that same rawness, or is it more numb now?
I think that I vacillate between frustration and anger and disbelief. Like, and then then you kind of like, well, I'll say for me, I judge myself like, why aren't you over this yet? You know what I mean? Like, so I'm not being very kind to my wounded inner child in those moments. But I'm just like, I want to get over it, but I can't, because every single day there's something else more treacherous happening. And on the thing about the voice that I think is important, one, thank you. That means a lot coming from you. It also feels like a lot of pressure. And sometimes I don't want to bear that pressure. Like, I just want to speak my truth without having the responsibility of the community. And I think especially now, because there are things that I say that the community doesn't love. Another point of privilege is whether it's in every relationship I've been in, every, boyfriends, family members have all loved me. I'm used to the community being like, that's our girl. And like, within the last 7 or 8 months, it's been like division even coming from the community, and that shit hurts. Sorry. Am I not supposed to?
Nah, you can curse
I cuss
as much as you fucking want.
I'm sorry. Okay, that's my
Let it out.
That's an important point that you're making.
Hurts.
Yeah.
It's really sad, because it's like, number one, black folks aren't monolithic. We're
That's
not going to
absolutely
agree
right.
on every single thing all the time.
And that's where our discourse is at right now,
It
where
is.
if you don't agree with every single thing I agree with.
Like every single thing, and it's like, I don't, number one, I'm not ever going to be the type of voice for you where I'm going to speak your truth and shame mine or hide mine. I can't do that.
You know what I think that comes from? Coming from academics and speaking to that academic privilege, I was taught, drilled in me, that you have to research.
Yeah.
Coming from, the 5% God body community in Brooklyn when I was running the streets, I was taught show and prove.
Yeah.
Show and prove. If you don't show and prove, then, your word is not bond. Your word has to be bond. And so now we have a generation, I think, of people who, you have experience as a lawyer, you had to go to school for this, you have experience in the community. People talk about on code, but don't really understand what that means. People are getting their information in my opinion, from YouTube exclusively.
And
They're
not
watching
fact-checking.
talking heads on YouTube, and it's like confirmation bias. They're watching things that validate what they already believe.
Yeah.
They're in those comment sections, and then they're going to Twitter and Facebook, and they're speaking on what they saw on YouTube, and then they're making YouTube videos about what they saw on YouTube, and they're like, click and let me monetize and give you my opinion about. And so when you don't have sort of a filter, you don't have any type of, and I don't want to, it's not about authority or gatekeeping.
Yeah.
It's just about knowledge.
But the thing is, so yes, I agree with that. But I also think that for me, my role as a voice is not to be. I want my word to be bond, but I will also misspeak.
Absolutely.
Because I'm human. I will
Absolutely.
forget something. I was on the phone with my assistant earlier. I was like, oh, I got to pay this makeup artist from something 2 weeks ago. And then I was like, when I told you I was going to do that, did you do it or did I do it? And she called me back 45 seconds later to make sure I did it. That's a problem. Like, you know, when your short-term memory is just... So my point is in saying this, that sometimes I'll say things thinking people will understand the full context, but they don't because they're not in my head. I do that with my team all the time. But there's no room for error. We're not giving each other any grace. And it's not from, like, a spirit of love. Now, granted, if you go back to, you know, Marcus Garvey, W.E.B., Booker T, they weren't always so gracious either. Some nasty comment sections. They would have had YouTube videos, child. It would be lit right now.
They'd have been calling Malcolm X an immigrant.
Or that right now, yes. But I think, or Marcus Garvey too. But like the point that I'm raising is just that I would like for us to evolve beyond even where they were. As brilliant as they were, like, can we operate from a place of love, agree to disagree, truly respectfully, not just to be saying it.
Right, revolutionary love.
That would be a thing.
Not just revolutionary rhetoric.
Yeah.
And listen to understand and not just listen to condemn, because I feel like a lot of these new kids, number one, they're very, very privileged and they feel like what their word is goes, and they don't really do all the research like you're saying, because before we had to go and look at encyclopedia. So it's like most of our information is written down that's coming from the same place. Now there's so many outlets of information you can get that you have no idea if it's correct or not.
And some of that is good, you know, because the encyclopedias was written by old rich white men. But
I loved reading the encyclopedia.
it's about,
though.
but it's about vetting your sources, right? It's about understanding that if you're reading Huffington Post or The Root or, you know, whatever these stories, you have to understand this is a left progressive bias, and they might be biased and they think. I'm of the opinion that the leftist bias is closer to the truth.
Yeah.
That's my own opinion.
Right.
But, you know, you have to understand that, you know, there's sites that have a right bias. There's sites that, Encyclopedia Britannica has a bias.
And there's also sites that just are wrong. You know, and to me, like, if there was one thing, like, if I die tomorrow, I want people to know this. Because it's in print does not make it fact.
That's right.
Period. Like, we got 1,000 textbooks. I use this example all the time in my, see how I didn't even finish my last sentence, but I have a better idea. There's a
Take note, that's what smart people do.
Yes.
They cover it all.
Or you got ADD or something. But there is a thing that I say in speeches often where I'm talking about George Washington, and those are not wooden teeth. Those were not wooden teeth in his mouth. They were teeth from his slaves. We didn't learn that in class because they wanted us to believe he was just out here picking apples or whatever the hell. He was like, right? Didn't you learn about George Washington and his apples?
That's
You
what
learned that he had wooden teeth in his mouth.
Yeah.
Like, they want to glamorize this stuff. And I posted something about, man, some of these dudes that had no business on Mount Rushmore, and somebody from Indian country was like, they didn't need Mount Rushmore, they took that from us too. And I was like, facts, you right. So, you know, anyway, I don't even know what my point was. It's not fact because it's in print. The textbooks are lying too.
That's right.
But you just got to read everything. When you read an article, try and find at least 4 more articles on that same thing to try and figure out if it's telling you the truth.
Come on, journalists, and teach. Come on.
No doubt.
Come on.
So when I say something that people have an issue with, they go after my music. If they can't beat my argument, they'll go after my music, or they'll be like, you know, Mos Def was better or this and that. With women, they're going to go after your looks. And your hair and your clothes immediately.
There's a I won't give him any power by mentioning his name, but there's not even an activist. What is he? I not even want to call him a scholar because he couldn't get tenure. A person who, like, is mad at something I said recently. He's always mad at me. He claims that I was arrogant when I met him. I think I was just rushing out of a venue, but people decide that's arrogance. But he called me a bitch on whatever platform he has. And so I think that's interesting. To me, I'm more offended by bitch than I am cunt. Cunt doesn't hit me as much as like
That's
the
a white
N-word does.
people
Yeah, I think it
insult,
might
that's
be.
why.
I
Yeah,
don't
white
get-
women get very upset.
Yeah, I don't want to be called one necessarily.
You know that you
but,
can
like,
get
I'm
kicked
like,
off of Twitter for calling a woman a cunt.
Oh, well, they need
But
to
you
be
can't
kicking
get
people I
kicked
get
off of
called
Twitter
that
for
outside.
calling a woman a bitch.
Interesting.
Yeah, cunt is seen as, I know the TOS
Let's talk to
very
Jack
well.
about that. I know.
Very well. I know the ins and outs.
If y'all didn't know
Totally
Talib was a troll, he's a troll on Twitter, y'all. It's a professional, high-grade troll.
Professional.
Hey, man, I troll the trolls, man. I bully the bullies. That's what I do.
We need,
Robin
I make
Hood.
them rethink their decision.
is that what you do?
That's what I do. I make them rethink their course of action. Like, you might want to back up.
Oh, sorry.
Let's talk about feminism versus womanism. What
Yes,
what
let's.
is your definition of those?
So I do believe that feminism, the intention of the feminism definition is to ensure that women have the same rights as men and deserve them, and of course we do. Womanism is, I think, a different iteration of that because particularly women of color felt as if feminism didn't include them. Particularly when the movements kind of started. I think it's interesting as we're creeping upon women's suffrage, the centennial anniversary for women's suffrage, which will be 2020, that this is still a discussion point. But I think it needs to be one. 53% of white women voted for Donald Trump. White women are clearly silent in the South where, you know, these abortion bans, bills restricting reproductive justice rights are being, you know, passed writ large. And it's like, at what point do you put your interests over your husband's and your sons? So I think that still remains an issue. I know I was reading this article, I don't know, I want to say a few months ago when they were talking about women's suffrage coming up. I'm going to send it to you because it actually was really dope. But this writer was talking about not repeating the mistakes of the past, right? And making sure that this time in 2020, it's a more inclusive movement. That if it's a race issue, but it's still a woman bringing the race issue to you, it's time for white women to align behind this race issue from a spirit of intersectionality, like be really embracing that and it not just being upon us to embrace intersectionality.
That's the criticism that the black community has with feminism. And not the black community, certain
Some
aspects, some
folks, yeah,
people,
yeah.
they criticize intersectionality as well.
Yeah.
I am someone who would like to think of myself as supportive of feminism,
Yeah.
of the concept of it, not of how it's been played out in black communities with black
Absolutely.
women. I'm also supportive of womanism. But there, you know, I publicly identify as a feminist. I publicly identify as a womanist. To me, it's they're saying the same thing. What do you think it is now, and tying it into the reproductive justice conversation? Because from what I understand, reproductive justice, as opposed to talking about being pro-life or pro-choice, brings in the fact that white women have a better shot of getting abortions, and it brings in the health risk, and it brings in the class and race issues that don't get talked about in the pro-life, pro-choice thing. What do you think it is that's creating, besides the obvious, misogyny and sexism, that's creating such a hatred and such a backlash for women, particularly now, standing up for their rights?
I think that the religious right has cloaked this in what is holy. And I think that if we are to cloak it in what is holy, that the religious right should have to state whether they are Christian when they go and get that Viagra. I think that the religious right should have to take a lie detector test on whether or not they've ever pulled out. You know, like, I'm just like, let's just be for real, because the hypocrisy is insane. And I normally don't talk about sex like this because I grew up in the church. But now I'm just like, listen, if we're going to legislate vaginas, we're going to legislate penises too.
That's right, because I can go get a vasectomy.
But I want to legislate vasectomies too. You know, and I started looking at this when I found out that the military paid prescription prices, or paid for prescriptions for Viagra, but they didn't want to pay for the prescriptions for transgender people in the military. So I was just like, this is some hypocrisy that's unbelievable. So anyway, it's just like there's a scripture that says, he who's without sin cast the first stone. And I'm just like, it's more of that. It's not really about what is holy, because if it was about what is holy, there wouldn't be migrant children sleeping on rocks.
That's
if it
right.
was about what is holy, we wouldn't be locking people up so that private prisons could make more money. If it was about what was holy, we wouldn't have the homelessness crisis that is rampant throughout the country, right? If it was about what's holy, we wouldn't be fighting for people to be making minimum wage, a livable wage that is a minimum wage, right? It is about control. It is about fear. And it's, they on their Pharisee type stuff.
That's interesting to me because I didn't grow up in the church. But what I've seen happen in politics, and I've seen the black community, certain people in our community fall for this, is this idea that the right wing or conservatives own family values. Or they own the concept of wanting to be active in your community and this and that. And, you know, it's very important to me that people understand that you're someone who is not a right-wing person at all. But you grew up in the church. And you have the same values, like that. Those values are not owned by a political party. In the same way that the right wing doesn't own homophobia.
But the other thing is, like you said, they don't own family values. I would say that they don't even display family values.
I agree with
because
that.
why are there so many broken families?
And that's how long the con is, because they don't even display family values, but they've convinced the whole country
that's true.
that not only that we are the, like, if you're not a right wing person, you know, like right wingers and white supremacists who argue with me online, they try to claim Malcolm X. Because they're saying he's a conservative, because he's religious and he's a family man. He must be a conservative. He's a pro-black, Pan-African, son of an immigrant, Muslim black man who didn't even identify as an American.
They try to claim Frederick Douglass and Martin Luther King too. And who else?
They've been trying to claim King for years, but this Malcolm thing is new. You know, they're
that's
you know.
fair. I hear you. They probably are pulling old clips. I think the worst thing that happens now, speaking of what happens online, people take like small sound bites.
Yeah, that Ballad of the Bullet. They took the Ballad of the Bullet speech and they make these GIFs and these memes where they take where Malcolm says he's not a Democrat. But he also said, I'm not a Republican. I'm not an American.
That's right.
They just take the I'm not a Democrat. He was very critical of Democrats and liberals, but he would also criticize the Republicans in the same sentence. They would just leave that out.
It's not just the labels, though. It really is democracy. There's no such thing as a democracy with a two-party system. And the third lane, or it's not existent. The independent streak is the Green Party ain't a thing. Bernie is independent until he needs a Democratic base for votes. Like, it's not a real thing. And so I always think about, speaking of posters on the wall, my dad brought back home. Right after Nelson Mandela's election, like this thing about South Africans' democratic system. And there were all these parties, like they had parties based on sports, and like there were a gazillion parties on this poster. And I'm in my mind, in high school, in middle school, I was like, that's what democracy is supposed to look like. And I've never shed that thought. I'm like, we could have a black party. If the Tea Party pushed Republicans further to the right, we could have a black party that pushes Democrats further to inclusivity. Don't call yourself a big tent party if half of the damn party is invisible to you.
That's right.
So it's so funny to me because they saying I'm bought off by the Democrats. I'm like, where is the money then?
You don't gotta.
These folks are afraid of me. Like, I'm not bought off by no damn Democratic Party. I'm more critical of the Democrats because I expect more out of them than Republicans. But I'm like, you guys are so dumb.
They say I get checks too. They say I got a Soros check and a DNC check. And
you got a DNC
checks with me because I need some checks.
DNC don't be paying no money.
Yeah. No, they really don't.
No, they really don't. And they were mad at me till not that long ago. My friend is the senior advisor over there now, but not that long ago, they were like.
Right. A lot of people in our community are sort of over the voting thing, and I've even in the past spoken on why I didn't vote. I've evolved in my thinking.
I was about to say.
Yeah, I've evolved in my thinking.
CNN look.
Yeah, is that one of the looks?
I was like, the hell?
So early in my life, I didn't like all the money in politics. I didn't like the electoral college. I didn't like my choices. I still to this day don't like the concept of voting for the lesser of two evils. I don't agree with that concept. What turned me around on voting was reading about Malcolm X and Adam Clayton Powell. And Malcolm, who's my hero, how they used the vote as a strategy, as a tool. Block voting, getting the community together on certain issues that we can, and looking at other communities in New York City that were doing the same thing. Of course, other communities didn't have the history of slavery like our community has, so it's different level of organizing. But I understand why people don't want to vote. So I'm not critical of it. I now speak in favor of voting, but I try not to shame or look at someone because I know what that feels like. I know why people thought like that. Right now, we have a situation where Donald Trump, people in our community say, well, why does it even matter that he's president? Because on the ground, whether it's Trump or Obama, conditions don't change. And there's truth to that. But there's also truth to the fact that there's aspects of the Trump administration that are dangerous in ways that we've never seen.
That's right.
And I think that you've spoken on those things very eloquently. And so what is it about Trump that makes him more anti-Black than our past presidents?
Yeah. I don't know that he's more anti-Black than our past presidents. I think that he's more bold with it. It's not like implicit. It is explicit and clear. I think that I take issue with voting or getting people to vote just to oppose him.
Right.
I feel like there is an empowerment strategy that must exist to get people to see their importance. I really believe our failure to mobilize around not just voting either, because I think that's part of the problem, but around our representation holistically in politics is where we're still kind of carrying slave mentality. And what I mean by that is, if you're not economically empowered because you don't have the resources, if your community is suffering because it doesn't have the resources, and the one thing you can do is engage in a political process to get those resources to the community and to businesses to change lives, is engaging in the political process. Like, that is the one place where we can change things. And for whatever reason, that does not click for us.
Right.
One of the things I think that was the most humbling for me, where I related more to this idea of not voting or why even do this if it's not going to change, is in the 2018 election, watching what happened with Stacey Abrams and Andrew Gillum. I promise you, Andrew won.
I agree.
I cannot wait until it's uncovered. I don't know how it's going to be uncovered, but I promise you he won. And
There was such a groundswell as well.
Man, and my visceral reaction was like, why do I even do this?
Right.
Like, why do I even do this?
A lot of people get stuck there.
And that's what happened. So I was like, let me sit with this so I can understand it, so I'm more empathetic going forward. But like, how do we change it? Because we can't stay here. They are going to kill us. And I'm not talking about taking lives and it being another civil war, although it could be that way. But like, they're going to starve us to death of all the resources. It is a slow death. There's an analogy that folks use all the time, talking about if you put a frog in boiling hot water, it's going to pop right out. But if you put the frog in the pot of water and slowly increase the temperature, it'll be boiled to death. That's what's happening with us. So the reason why we have to pay attention to everything that Trump is doing, and all the little Trumps in states and in city councils, all or mayors,
the judges that they're putting so they can have this anti-abortion legislation,
and the judges who will say that they can't even acknowledge that Brown versus Board of Education is the law of the land, which integrated schools. Like, we have to pay attention to that. There's
because
no
they're playing
better,
the long game.
Yeah, they've been doing that. There's no better advocate for us than ourselves. So I'm saying vote so that you can put people who think like us and look like us in office. Vote, because there would have never been a BET if Bob Johnson didn't engage in the political process. Sure, he sold it to Viacom now, but the point is we had representation on air. All of that stuff happens through the policymaking process.
And that's been sort of your whole mission, if from my perspective, impact, which, from what I could tell, took off very quickly. It has been super successful. Legislative advocacy is a term that I had never heard of until I looked up what I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah.
And that sounds like what you're talking about here.
Part of it is legislative, but I'm really talking about political advocacy overall, whether it is aligning state legislators like American Legislative Exchange Council that was stood up by the Koch brothers. They were writing up bills, and the state legislators in other places were copying and pasting that same legislation and dropping it. We need to be doing the same thing. That doesn't take money to do. So we developed a whole database of every Black elected official in the country, and I promise you, we are going to make that work for us.
When you Google search somebody and things come up, and with Angela Rye, CNN, Angela Rye, Impact, what does Angela Rye do? comes up, and it's because
Who is this fool, actually?
you know, especially around like the CBC, the Congressional Black Caucus, people are super ignorant about what it is that the Congressional Black Caucus does. So I would like you to enlighten us.
Yes, absolutely. So I worked for the Congressional Black Caucus during the 112th Congress. I was the executive director and general counsel. The Congressional Black Caucus now, because people turned out in the 2018 election, is the largest it's ever been. There are 55 members of Congress, black members of Congress who are members. There are two black members who aren't joined, so 57 members total. They're Republicans. But what they do, they're called the conscience of the Congress. And over time, the CBC has done everything from introducing a budget every year that they thought, basically how different departments should be funded. They have introduced a bill on reparations. Every single Congress, Mr. Conyers started that, and Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee from Houston just took that bill over. Whether it's in the amendment process, making sure that we're represented, that communities of color are considered, that they're advocated for, those are our voices. And I see them as mothers and fathers, some of them big brothers and big sisters now. We don't always all agree. They don't always all agree with each other.
Right.
But they are some of the best fighters we have in Congress, and I'm just grateful to see how they continue to evolve.
What do you have to say to people who are within our community, who are critical of them, in the same way that they're critical of people like Barack Obama, critical of them for working with big banks or working with certain lobbyists? What do you have to say to those critics?
So the first thing I would say is I was the CBC ED during President Obama's tenure, and some of the toughest moments I've had was when the CBC couldn't get support from the Obama administration on things like we were doing a jobs tour, and it was devastating to me that we couldn't get support and alignment with them. They decided to do a jobs tour in rural America when we were going to the heart of the community. That's when black unemployment was double, it's always double the national average, but it was like 16%. It was super high. So that was really crushing, but there were also some moments where we really did align and could work together. I think that, again, the way that you make policy is not monolithic, and they have to take into consideration what's in the best interest of their constituents and their districts. And sometimes those things are not in alignment. Right now, this is the first time where I think most of the CBC members do not represent majority minority districts, meaning they have more white constituents than they have black.
Wow. They
will still be the voices of Black America because we don't have anybody else.
Right.
Also, you talked about big banks. Congresswoman Maxine Waters is the chair, the first woman, the first black person ever to chair financial services. Child, she is taking these big banks to task. It is not happening.
Yeah, we love
She's
Maxine
maybe
Waters
we should
around
break
here.
y'all up.
Yeah.
Auntie Maxine.
Maybe y'all should go to jail,
Yeah.
That way. She's just not not care. And she's like the dopest, fiercest advocate ever. That was my first political internship.
Shout out to Maxine Waters.
Yes. The queen.
Do you have a top 5 favorite MCs?
So I'm gonna say Black Thought.
Black Thought. Exactly.
I'm gonna say.
I'm trying to tell him.
I'm gonna say JCole. I'm gonna do some newer ones because I feel like the newer ones don't
Okay,
get.
JCole.
Yeah. I'm gonna say Kendrick. I'm going to say I need a woman. I put Lauren in there.
Yeah, Lauren's got to make top 5.
I had to put Lauren in there.
Miss Hill.
How many do I have?
You're 4.
Damn. See what happens?
You got one more. A lot of competition for that last spot.
I know. I'm like, okay.
Choose wisely.
I'm like, I'm gonna say Tupac.
Tupac
I'm
Shakur.
gonna say Tupac. I have like 5 more, but
In the
I'll just
spirit
say
of revolutionary love.
Man.
For Tupac
I
Shakur.
love Tupac.
Ladies and gentlemen, Angela Rye.
Thank you. That
In
was
and out.
fun. Not enough